Good morning, Mr. Chair and Madam Chair. Let me begin by thanking you and your incredible staffs for all of the hard work, not only that went into the preparation for this hearing, but for your work throughout the year as we have attempted and continued to attempt to craft necessary and vital legislation for California's water future. I also want to thank the members, and rather than introduce or thank you all by name, let me just say that there have been a number of members who have been involved in these issues for many years, who have laid the groundwork, who have been trailblazers, and we would not be here today on the verge without your work and your support. I have a PowerPoint here, and this is, the 21st century after all, and I was once a professor, so there, and a lawyer, that's correct. But the purpose of going through a brief, hopefully relatively brief PowerPoint is to not only review the provisions of the bill, which is now SB 17X in the seventh special session, but also to point out the differences between SB 17X and SB 68, which was the bill that was before the House, not voted upon as we adjourned on the 11th of September, because I think that's the key thing that members of the public and obviously the members of the legislature want to know, and that is, how has the bill changed? How have we addressed concerns? How have we dealt with the myriad of controversies that surround such a large change in California's water policy? So if we can begin with slide one. Who's operating this? Yeah, I can. Which one is this? On the right. Okay. Good. I'd be glad to get anybody water, too, if anybody would like any. First of all, though this is not a hearing, I understand, in which votes will be taken, so technically we're not dealing with author's amendments. I did put up this slide because I do want to review with you that there are still some drafting issues that we are dealing with, and we do plan to amend the bill to deal with some of the drafting problems. For example, the bill has a member of the Delta Protection Commission as an ex officio member of the Delta Stewardship Council. That's not the intent. That's a drafting error. The DPC ex officio member, we will amend that to make that person a permanent member, because that was the intent. We also clarify language regarding membership of the Delta Protection Commission to ensure that the north part of the Delta is adequately represented. We continue to tweak the Water Code Section 375 clarification dealing with existing local ordinances around conservation. We still have some language to consider and to get right around covered actions in the Delta secondary zone. The concept at this point is that we would exempt those lands that are consistent with Senate Bill 375 from last year, the Greenhouse Gas Transportation Act that I was privileged to author. We have some minor changes on wastewater mitigation language as it affects the Sacramento Regional Sanitation District, and some other technical amendments.
Senator Steinberg, just there is also some additional language that's supposed to go in the urban water retailer water supplier section near page 61 that the Met and San Diego County Water Authority and others had the understanding that it would be in. So I guess it's a little drafting error.
That's added to the list as well. Thank you. Under the catch-all of other technical amendments. No problem. Background context. Even though we have been through this together many, many times, I do think it is worth describing again what this is about, why this is so important, and why there is urgency. The Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, which is the heart of the state water system, is one earthquake, one flood away from collapse, and 24 million people could potentially lose their drinking water. The state water supply is obviously changing for all the reasons we know. There's our supply issues, but we also need to manage water more efficiently, stop water theft, manage our groundwater resource more efficiently, and provide options for conveyance and for storage. And as we all know, this is, depending on your perspective, 3 to 5 decades in the making. The legislature has attempted to grapple with these issues for many years and unsuccessfully. Now is our opportunity. There's been a lot of questions about public process, and I just want to state the facts once and then move on. In the past 10 months alone, there have been at least 2 informational hearings, 4 policy committee bill hearings on each of the bills within SB 17X, 4 appropriations committee hearings on each of the bills, 2 conference committee hearings, and 5 floor debates and votes on provisions of these bills. That's in addition to the Public Policy Institute report of 2007, the Delta Blue Ribbon Commission report of 2008, Assembly and Senate committee informational hearings early in 2009, and though they weren't public, the leadership sponsored bipartisan bicameral working groups that met for months this year. All of the proposals embodied within SB 17X are based upon the governor and the legislature's 2008 Delta Vision Task Force report. The focus, of course, is on fixing the Delta, new governance, funding, and protections to improve water conservation by 20% by 2020, to stop water theft, to protect those who have legal rights to water, to better monitor and manage our groundwater use, and to provide financing for key water system improvements. And I want to reiterate what Assemblymember Huffman said a moment ago. The legislative leadership is meeting with the governor this morning to finish a proposal, emphasis a proposal, on a bond. That's no secret. And we all know that we are working to have a comprehensive package. So do not take the fact that the bond isn't in print yet as anything more than the fact that there's still a little bit of work left to do. On fixing the Delta, this is the key here. The bill, of course, provides for a new governance entity known as the Delta Stewardship Council. It provides for a new conservancy. It amends the Delta Protection Commission. It employs a science review panel, which is key to making sure that the decisions we make are based on science, not on politics, and a water master with authority to help ensure that the plan is adopted in a correct way. The new plan, the Delta Plan, is not only what's called for in the Delta Blue Ribbon Task Force to ensure that the co-equal goals of water supply reliability and restoring the Delta ecosystem, all consistent with maintaining the Delta as an evolving place. The Delta Plan is the document, if you will, the living document that will be put together by the Stewardship Council that will be the steward and responsible for the achievement of those co-equal goals. The bill, of course, maybe the most important part of the bill, and people have different perspectives on this, we all know that the Bay Delta Conservation Plan is moving down the track. And so those for or against a canal, I think most people would agree that the Delta Stewardship Council for proponents provides a more stable process and a more understandable process to get to a decision as to what is the appropriate thing to do with conveyance around the Delta, through the Delta, combination of through Delta, around the Delta. The BDCP is on its way. Without this sort of overriding structure that provides some coherence and governance, many people say that the BDCP itself could get tied up in litigation for years, if not decades. From the other side, those who are concerned that the BDCP is a fast train moving down the track, the Delta Stewardship Council is a check, because its fundamental authority is to ensure upon appeal that the BDCP is in fact consistent with the co-equal goals of restoring the ecosystem, maintaining water supply reliability, all done in a way that is respectful and considers the Delta as an evolving place. The bill as well provides for the highest level of CEQA analysis known as for the BDCP known as an NCCP, all these acronyms here, but a higher level of environmental review before the BDCP can even be certified. Next slide. The bill, of course, also contains the key elements of the Huffman-Fuhr conservation bill.
Actually, it was Fuhr-Huffman, I have
It was Fuhr-Huffman. Sorry, Mike. There goes one vote. There we go. Okay. Yeah. And of course, much of the work of Senators Ducheney and Dutton, SB 261, has been incorporated as part of the compromise. But we do establish a 20% by 2020 water conservation target. It applies to urban and ag water users. There is flexibility for the locals, 4 different pathways, which we can discuss, and the witnesses here can discuss in some detail. And for agriculture, they are required to put together best management practices. We have a specific sanction applied to the failure to meet the goal, which is the loss of state water grants and loans. In other words, the bond which the voters hopefully will pass, future bonds, if you don't meet one of the 4 pathways, you'll lose the eligibility for water bonds. Next, improving groundwater monitoring and management. The fact of the matter is about 75% of the state's water basins already perform groundwater monitoring, but it is voluntary under current law. Most states require groundwater monitoring. The bill requires mandated reporting statewide, but unlike the original version of Senator Pavley's bill, who also has done incredible work moving this forward, the amended bill, or SB 17X, assigns the local water agencies to perform the mandate. The local agencies must submit to the Department of Water Resources for statewide data on the use. And like conservation, there is the loss of grants and loans in the water area for failure to perform. One of the key Republican concerns that we have addressed, and among the technical amendments that, or among the amendments that I've spoken with Senator Hollingsworth about, is to make sure it is crystal clear that even though this is a local mandate, no local government official may enter land or compel reporting without the property owner's permission. So in other words, the local agency has the responsibility. And if they don't perform it, their county, under the way the bill is written, may lose water funds. And so it's going to be up to the local agency to seek volunteers, to use incentives to gain the permission of property owners to go onto their land to be able to measure their groundwater use. It's a compromise, but again, it's a compromise that respects private property rights and at the same time ensures that someone is accountable for getting the information to the state. The other part of Senator Pavley's bill, SB 229, was limiting illegal water diversions. This is key. It's sort of like the underground economy when it comes to labor and employment. Why should those who are following the law be disadvantaged by those who are not following the law? And from a statewide perspective, we are losing potentially thousands of acre-feet of water per year, water that would otherwise be available for lawful urban or ag use. The bill as amended increases reporting requirements. It increases the fines from $500 a day to $1,000 per day for the first offense, $5,000 per day for a second offense, or the market value of water, whatever is higher. The bill also streamlines enforcement, and one of the most important pieces provides 25 new so-called PYs, 25 staff, engineers, attorneys, and others to allow California to be much more aggressive in enforcing our water rights laws. That shouldn't be in there. Here we go. Hold on here. Okay. Change. Where's Kim?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, or Mr. Steinberg, I was just going to ask if, while you're looking at that, will the committee members, unless I've missed something, will we be able to get a copy of your PowerPoint?
Okay. I'm sorry?
I was just asking, since you're looking and so forth right now, would it be possible for the committee members to have a copy of your PowerPoint?
Oh, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah. Although, you remember when President...
Although it would change, right?
Yeah. Well, you remember when President Clinton was giving his State of the Union address, like I think in 1995, and the teleprompter messed up and he had to go off of his notes? We're going to stop the PowerPoint here because it has changed since that version. So I apologize for that. Let me review again the key revision since SB 68 was heard on the 11th of September of 2009. First of all, we have made significant amendments giving the Delta cities and counties greater local control over land use in the secondary zone. If you recall, the Delta Blue Ribbon Task Force called for the Stewardship Council to have jurisdiction over the secondary zone. After hearing from the local representatives, we made some changes, and it's a difficult balance because if you exempt too much of the secondary zone, then you are losing the benefit of trying to provide coherent governance where there are over 200 entities and agencies that currently operate within the Delta and have some authority, and the Stewardship Council loses some of the force and impact that we all hope it has to achieve the co-equal goals. So what we did, again, is we said that those projects that are consistent with last year's SB 375 and therefore part of an agreed-upon urban footprint would in fact be exempt. We assured that the West Sacramento member of the DPC remains on the DPC. Third key point here, we ensured that in-stream flows do not impair water rights. And this has been maybe among the most controversial issues, and I want to spend just a moment on it, especially from the Bay Area water agencies, the Sacramento water agencies, and the so-called upstream diverters. Here's the situation we face here in California to simplify it. We have more people, both in Southern and Northern California, so it's not just geographical. We have less water. We have a delta that desperately needs more water. And we have existing water agencies and cities and counties with sacrosanct and very good water rights. How do we reconcile the need for more water in the Delta, the fact that we have more people and less water, and make this system work? And so we were clear in SB 68 that nothing in the bill impacted existing water rights, and we were specific about pre-1914, post-1914, and other descriptions of water rights. And the Bay Area, and again Sacramento and the upstream diverters, didn't think that that was quite enough. So then we stepped back and recognized the following. If this bill does not go into effect, if all this goes away, under the existing law, under the existing law, the State Water Resources Control Board has the legal authority, upon proper petition, to hold evidentiary hearings and to determine a change in water rights. That's the existing law. And so we have been reluctant to do anything that would increase protection beyond what the existing law is, because that would defeat the overall purpose of trying to achieve the co-equal goals. But we did come to an agreement with the San Francisco PUC, and we do hope that some of the other Bay Area agencies and the Contra Costa Water District, we do hope that some of the other Bay Area agencies, Sacramento and the upstream diverters, will look at SFPUC's letter of support and look at the language which can be found on page 97 of your printed bill, and see that before there can be any preliminary public trust determinations around the issue of in-stream flows, that there has to be a full public hearing with full public input. And that before any water rights could ever be affected, there has to be the full evidentiary hearing and full process that exists under the current law. Why is this important? Because in-stream flows, frankly, are the key to fixing the delta. To put it in layperson's terms, in-stream flows is about how much fresh water is the delta going to need to restore its ecosystem. And until that determination is made, and until we figure out as a state where we are going to get that water, the achievement of these crucial co-equal goals cannot occur. But again, significant changes, page 97, it's brought on San Francisco, and we hope it brings on the other Bay Area, Sacramento, and upstream entities as well. On water conservation, since September the 11th, the bill provides greater flexibility to inland suburban water agencies, otherwise known as Path 4. It basically gives the Department of Water Resources 1 year to adopt regulations setting new standards at 20% or below. And the DWR can take into account the impact of climate on particular areas of the state, lot size, and other factors. This meets the strong demand we've heard from a number of agencies saying we need greater flexibility. On the business side, the bill provides greater flexibility for water-intensive manufacturing and research and development activities. We've exempted R&D, and we've made the change on this so-called 375 issue, not SB 375, but an old water code section 375 that allows local water agencies essentially to develop more stringent conservation rules than any state law. We've made some changes to assure that the drought area law, this old 375, cannot be used to impose numeric water conservation restrictions on manufacturers who use water. On the issue of groundwater monitoring, like I said, we made a fundamental shift. We went from a under Senator Pavley's bill, if the locals didn't do it, the DWR would come in and do it themselves. We changed that. Now we under the bill, directs local water agencies to implement the monitoring. Again, it prohibits water agencies from accessing private property or compelling the monitoring information from property owners. And again, the failure to provide the monitoring results in loss of water grants and funds. Here's one nuance and detail, but it's important. Given that there are overlapping water entities, oftentimes within a county, what the bill says is that if a local water agency fails to perform the groundwater monitoring, it becomes the responsibility of the county. If the county fails to do it, it's the county, the overall county, then that loses the eligibility for the bond funds. That's to ensure that there is actually some accountability and responsibility, because you could see the monitoring being done in one water basin but not in another with overlapping jurisdictions, and the one that did it would get the bond funds and it would inure to the benefit of the one that didn't. So this provides we think, more clear accountability. On the issue of illegal diversions of water, as I said earlier, the Pavley bill increased penalties. In the amended bill, we established tiered penalties, $1,000 for an initial violation, $5,000 for subsequent violations, or the highest market value of water, as a significant concession to those concerned about too broad of authority to the State Water Board. We have eliminated the entire section on interim relief and eliminated the new cease and desist authority. Last but not least, I want to spend a moment on the Delta, and because among the controversies have been, is the Delta adequately protected under this comprehensive legislation? And again, I would remind everyone of the context. If you believe that the Bay Delta Conservation Plan is in fact a sound plan, and there's, controversy over that, but if you believe that is in fact a train moving down the track, then the conveyance that some are concerned about, the administration, the water contractors, and others believe that that process itself will provide authority to take that action. This process ensures that there is a more coherent, understandable, and inclusive process to determine what the right answers are when it comes to conveyance and the Delta. For the Delta counties have complained, right or wrong, I don't make a judgment about it, that they have been excluded, in fact, from the BDCP. And this, again, provides, I think, a legitimate check on that process. But in addition, as you see the finance piece roll out over the next day or two, you will see that there is increased local funding for not only ecosystem restoration in the Delta, but hundreds of millions of dollars for local funding for economic revitalization within the Delta. Legally binding assurances which don't exist now that Delta counties will be compensated for any lost property tax revenue due to actions in the Delta, such as the construction of a new water conveyance facility. Legally binding assurances that costs to upgrade regional sanitation facilities triggered by CEQA mitigation requirements will be borne by those proposing the changes. Strong local and regional representation on existing and new governance entities created within the package. 5 out of 11 Delta representatives on the Delta Conservancy. Again, as I stated earlier with an author's amendment, the chair of the Delta Protection Commission will be a full voting member of the Delta Stewardship Council. More flexibility when it comes to conservation. More legally binding assurances on existing water rights and area of origin rights. Greater local control over land use determinations in the Delta secondary zone. A heightened authority for the Delta Protection Commission to have its recommendations and findings incorporated into the Delta plan if they are consistent, in fact, with the co-equal goals. And so, members, this is a comprehensive package. And as been said by many, the definition of a compromise, in my view, ought to be the following. It ought to be that there is some things in a package that members and stakeholders either don't like or would do differently. But there are so many more things that members and stakeholders want and need for California to move forward around this crucial issue. And then finally, we all suffer a little bit as legislators and stakeholders and members of the public from what I call negotiation fatigue, right? You sort of have to step back sometimes and say, all right, where are we here? Because The wrong frame, in my view, is to simply is to ask the question, well, geez, what have I given and gotten over the last month? It's relevant, but it isn't the key question. What have I given and gotten over the last month and a half since the legislative session ended? Instead, I think the right frame and the right question is, if this package were put before the legislature for the first time today, and of course, it's not the first time, as I stated earlier, but for the first time today, combined with the finance package that everyone at least knows the broad outlines of, would you say that this is a dramatic improvement over the status quo? I think the answer is clearly yes. I appreciate your time, and